Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Roofing Contractors Best of Success podcast show. I'm RC Editor-in-Chief Art Eisner, and I'm glad you've joined us today to have a conversation with Justin Kosher, who's with Pima. Justin, great to have you here. And just for anyone that may not know, tell us what Pima is and what's your role in the roofing industry.
Great, thanks, Art. Pima is the Polyiso Cyanuret or Polyiso Insulation Manufacturers Association. We're a trade association that's been around for 35 years, and our members are the manufacturers of laminated polyiso board stock for roof wall and below grade applications, as well as their raw material suppliers and testing labs that provide services to the manufacturers.
All right, so been in the industry a while and no signs of slowing down as far as the industry goes. Let's talk about the state of the industry overall, in your opinion, and then let's get specific about what's happening with Polyiso.
Sure. Well, I think if you're in the roofing industry, you're in the right place to make a difference moving forward on how our homes and buildings perform. It's an exciting time. There's a lot of information and a lot of things changing at the moment, which can present some opportunities, but also some challenges. And I know kind of slowly putting the pandemic era behind us with those challenges, and our industry is really looking to get to work on implementing some of the policies that I know we'll talk about a little bit later on how roofing and specifically Polyiso can improve the performance of both new buildings as well as the many, many existing buildings that we work on every day as the roofing industry.
So without getting caught up too much on the science of it, if you can just describe, what makes Polyiso so effective, and how does it really help, how does the roof help create that high performing building envelope?
Yes, I know many of the listeners are going to be familiar with Polyiso, but just as a quick background introduction, Polyiso is a rigid foam board. It's a closed cell board, which means it has a captive blowing agent. And one of its key characteristics is that it has a high R value per inch. The Polyiso boards are manufactured with several different types of facers. We've got kind of traditional organic, or some people call them paper facers, also manufactured with coated glass facers and foil-faced facers. And those all give the board different properties, whether it's being used in a roof or a wall, or maybe in combination with other roofing products that may be installed on that building. So a very versatile product. And then when it comes to the building performance, I mean, I think it starts with insulation, right? You're primarily installing insulation to keep the conditioned air in and the outside air out of a building, stopping that heat transfer. On a summer day, the hot from hot moving in, and on a winter day, that warm conditioned air on the inside, preventing that from escaping. But insulation does a lot more too for that building performance. It also helps eliminate air and moisture movement through the roof assembly, as well as the wall assemblies, which all lead to that high performance that we aspire to.
Well, and let's talk about that one factor that all roofers battle against, and that is water or moisture. So how does Polyiso perform when it is exposed to moisture?
Right. I mean, obviously the goal for a roof is for that outermost layer, the roof membrane or roof covering, to stop that water from intruding in into the roof system. I think Polyiso serves a number of different functions. First, kind of assisting with the overall roof system's design and performance. Many listeners are going to be familiar with tapered insulation, tapered Polyiso insulation. So there you're installing that to create adequate slope on that roof to make sure what water lands on the roof is drained as quickly as possible, right? Because ponding water is probably ranks up there, if not the top reason for roof failure. It's got to be in the top three. So getting the water off the roof as quickly as possible in tapered insulation can be a critical tool. When you're talking about the insulation itself, as a closed cell foam, Polyiso is inherently water resistant, though the product's overall performance in terms of moisture resistance is going to largely be determined by the facers that you use. So if you're using a coated glass facer, which we see a lot of here in the U.S., that's going to provide that additional resistance to moisture. Certainly the aluminum foil or foil faced, which here in the US and Canada use mostly on the wall side. So those are going to be the types of products that deliver that increased moisture resistance versus the traditional polyiso. It's made with the organic facer, which its properties will absorb that moisture when exposed to water. But our goal is to keep the water out at that first line of defense, and using products like polyiso and tapered insulation can help you achieve that level of performance.
Given how much emphasis there is amongst facility owners and managers, on energy efficiency and what you just described, it really sounds like contractors can play a really key role in enhancing a building's overall performance, right? How do they help sell that approach? When they're out there dealing with facility managers.
Absolutely, yeah. I think a contractor's role in a roofing project might vary from project to project. If it's new construction, that contractor's contribution may come in the form of mostly of quality install. So making sure that they're taking the design that they're given from the architect or building designer and implementing it and installing it correctly to achieve that desired level of performance. I think when you're talking facility managers in existing buildings, that contractor is going to wear a lot of hats. They are probably going to be assisting that facility owner with evaluating that existing roof system, determining whether it's in need of repair, replacement, or recover. Once those decisions are made, that roofing contractor is probably being leaned on for guidance on what materials to use. If the building owner doesn't have kind of a preset of materials, and then that contractor is going to be responsible for designing the system and installing the materials. But along the way, that contractor can get a lot of help from PIMA members, along with other, manufacturer reps. One way that PIMA members often engage in these projects is kind of going back to the tapered. Most of the members offer tapered design services to contractors. So they'll map out the existing roof, and that manufacturer will work with the contractor to design a tapered system with the intent of improving that roof's performance for that particular building owner. So I know the contractors wear a ton of hats, but there's also a ton of resources out there for contractors to lean on, especially at the manufacturer level.
Well, I'm glad you just mentioned that. So is there data available that illustrates those benefits, for upgrading existing roof systems that contractors can get their hands on?
Yeah, in fact, PIMA's done some research over the past couple of years to update some older information and kind of better understand both the state of existing buildings as well as to identify how we may be able to increase the performance of those existing buildings. So PIMA, working with a third-party energy analyzer, we looked at buildings in both the US and Canada. We made some assumptions about what type of existing insulation a building may have, depending on its type and its location. And then we said, what happens if we take these existing buildings and we update them to the current model code? So thinking ASHRAE 90.1 2019 as a baseline for insulation upgrade. And what we found were impressive savings. If you look at buildings that are single or two-story, so elementary or secondary schools, depending on the location of that building, and of course, as you move to colder climate zones, there's more opportunity to save energy. We saw buildings of the school type saving 6, 7, 8, even 10% on their annual energy use just by updating the roof. So it clearly has the potential to have an outsized impact on that overall building performance. And those studies are broken down on the PIMA website, and we'll talk a little bit more where people can find those. And they're meant to be a discussion starter, right? It's just an example of a prototype building in different climate zones, but it gives you a sense of the magnitude of the opportunity we're talking about for the vast majority of buildings that are 3 stories or less, where that roof makes up a significant portion of the overall building envelope.
Well, and you mentioned codes, and that can obviously vary by region as well. But what are some of the latest codes that are impacting this segment of the market, and are the resources that PIMA has available for roofers in that front too?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. Codes are going to vary by jurisdiction. A lot of times the state will adopt a code for all of its jurisdictions. Some states don't do that, and it's up to the local jurisdictions. So, readers and contractors will have to understand where they do work and how the codes function. PIMA does have several resources on our website. We have a fact sheet library for roof insulation requirements. So if you're on our website, you can find a state-by-state fact sheet that breaks down what are the insulation requirements for roofing in my jurisdiction. You'll find links to helpful resources, links to the state or local code. And in terms of what's new, we've been fortunate in the roofing industry to have a strong set of codes to begin with. They'll be modified and changed, every 3 years or according to the update cycle. I think the real challenge and where there's change, and I think that change is going to happen at a quicker pace, is at the state level. So we have states that are leaders in energy efficiency. You kind of think California, New York, Illinois, Maryland, a couple of states that are always at the leading edge of adopting the newest code. And then you have states, state that I call home right now, South Carolina, that's on the 2009 energy code. And I think you're going to start to see those states that have outdated codes begin to take action to update those, not only for energy purposes, but with extreme weather events, it's well documented that buildings built to the latest code perform better when faced with those extreme weather events. And I think there's more and more pressure from policies, from building owners, from insurance companies, to make sure that those buildings are built to better standards. So while the codes themselves aren't changing a whole lot, I think you're going to see the codes that certain states adopt and enforce change quite a bit, depending on how far behind they are today.
Interesting. So some of those attitudes are already changing. Do you think anything that the industry endured in this past year, certainly extreme weather, and passing of legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act that has a lot of energy efficiency incentives
Sure.
built in, is that pushing the envelope, or at least that conversation forward?
Yeah, I think so in multiple ways. So you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act or IRA. Just in the last couple of weeks, the U.S. Department of Energy has announced $400 million in grants to states and territories for adopting the more recent energy code for residential and commercial buildings. So that's certainly going to act as a catalyst for states to update their codes if they're outdated, or for states who had already planned to do it, maybe accelerate that work to take advantage of these funds. Also on codes, just this past week, FEMA announced that they were giving each state a $2 million grant to update their building code. So looking at the structural safety element of residential and commercial buildings, that's really a nod to the fact that in the recent weather disasters, you've seen significant differences in performance to buildings built to more recent codes versus those existing buildings that were built 10, 20, 30, even 40 years ago. So a lot happening there on codes. There's also direct investment from these federal programs that are going to bring, hopefully, business to the roofing industry through updating federal buildings, or private sector buildings that are receiving money. And I think in addition to just those buildings that receive direct funding, you're also just going to see more and more investment in that type of activity across both the public and private sector as building owners strive to meet these new requirements, or corporate commitments to improve their building performance or achieve environmental goals. So like I said at the outset, I think it's a good place to be in the roofing industry if you're here to make a difference in how buildings perform.
Right. And so it sounds like there are potentially a lot of opportunities there for roofers. What what are some of the bigger opportunities or some of the concerns that your membership are having as we look ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with these opportunities sometimes comes confusion. So just trying to sort through all of the new programs, the new opportunities. One unique policy that I think we see spreading throughout the country, and it presents opportunities, but along with it some challenges for building owners, are building performance standards. So you see a number of the major metropolitan areas, New York, for example, have these building performance standards, but also states like Washington State and Colorado adopting these standards, which actually require building owners who own and operate buildings of a certain size to be proactive over a period of time, reducing the energy use of those buildings. And it's certainly an opportunity for our industry to play a part. I think the challenge is going to be for contractors and others that work directly with building owners is understanding what requirements apply to your building, understanding how you may be able to take advantage of, say, natural replacement cycle of building elements. So if you're a building that's subject to one of these building performance standards and you've been considering the idea of a roof replacement, you really want to understand what the opportunity is with that roof replacement, because you ought to be thinking of maximizing the value of that if you're going to have to comply with some of these energy reduction requirements. So a lot of opportunity, but I think for our end customer building owners, there's a big challenge in sorting through, what am I going to have to do to my building? How can I do that economically? I think you kind of layer on top some of the economic conditions and uncertainty. It presents a challenging environment to do these projects, but there's a lot of tools and resources available. And hopefully, we as the roofing industry can do our part to make sure that these building owners take advantage of the opportunities related to the roof.
All right. Well, Justin, thanks for your insight and conversation today. Where can people find out more about Pima?
Yeah, our website's a great place to find us. So www.polyiso.org. You'll find some of the resources we talked about today, along with technical bulletins that answer commonly asked questions related to Polyiso for roofing contractors and designers.
All right. Well, before you all go there, be sure to sign up for our free e-magazine and e-newsletters right here on roofingcontractor.com so you can stay on top of the latest news and information impacting the industry. Justin, thanks again. Everyone, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.